Now to item 12. I'll ask Andrew to stay there and be joined by Kylie Evans, Michael Burns and Ross Tucker. And this is the key item, which is the adoption of the long-term plan. And well, first of all, actually I'll put it on record. I'll move accordingly. I think Councillor Clow to second that and ask staff to speak to the paper.
Thank you. So this item is seeking adoption of the final adoption of the 10-year budget. This is the final step in a lengthy process that's played out over the last 12 months. The couple of the key steps in the process recently is the decisions made on 31 May about the key policies and budget items in the budget. Staff have then turned those decisions into the documents. So there's 3 volumes of documents that we're asking you to adopt today. Those documents have travelled through the Audit and Risk Committee on Monday and been given a clean bill of health through that process. It's travelled through legal review and external audit review. You'll hear from the Office of the Auditor General shortly. The legal team have given sort of full sign-off of compliance with all statutory requirements. In the final stages of the audit process, there was one error identified, which has been circulated. So we're asking you to adopt the 3 volumes incorporating this correction that's been tabled. The correction relates to Auckland Transport's numbers. It's a late change resulting from the RLTP that was adopted by Auckland Transport last week. And essentially in the 10-year budget, we have to break the transport budget into 2 separate components. And there was a bit of an issue with the reallocation between the 2 components, and one of the two pages with financial tables were reflected an incorrect allocation. That's been corrected. Not a significant change, but it's important we get the right numbers in there in the final adopted document. Other than that, happy to take the report as read and answer any questions.
Thank you, Ross. Just to remind councillors what the procedure is from here, the next section is to address any questions to our finance team. Following that, I'll be inviting, I have received a representation letter from Stephen Town to confirm that everything has been done appropriately. I then, on the basis of that letter, pass a letter to the Office of the Auditor General, which we've already done just to save the walk around the table halfway through the meeting. I'll invite Greg Scollum and Joe Smale up to the table to give the Office of the Auditor General's opinion on our long-term plan and process, and then we will move to debate the item if there is any debate. So questions. The first thing up is questions to our finance team, if there are any questions. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Look, there has been some questions asked of me, i.e. are there some gaps in this report? In other words, does the 10-year budget document include a year-by-year capital project schedule? So that's my first question, and my follow-up question will be, when will the capital project schedule be published?
Okay, so there's no gap in the document. The document meets all statutory requirements. What we do with the CapEx schedule is we publish that on our website alongside the final adopted plan. And the reason for that, aside from legal requirements, is we think it's helpful to have a more live version of the CapEx project schedule out there that can be updated through each annual budget, through each year-end CapEx deferral process, so we can refresh and update the timing of the capital projects on our website. In terms of the follow-up question, we're currently busy updating that CapEx schedule based off the decisions made on 31 May, including the timing of the Ollies, and also updating it for the final decisions made as part of Auckland Transport Board adopting the RLTP last week. So all of the transport detailed projects will be in our CapEx schedule and be published early July.
Thanks, Ross.
Any further questions, Councillor? If not, any further questions around the table?
Yep.
Yes, Councillor Clow.
Can you just, at the Audit and Review Committee, in the summary, the risk team confirmed the review of the process used to develop the LTP found adequate risk reporting and effective internal controls, but then it says the team has recommended some improvements for future planning, which is, could you just explain in simple language what we're doing to improve what needs improving in the future?
It's essentially, I guess, just improving in what we're doing, moving towards best practice, primarily around documentation, so clearly documenting all risks in one place. Things like there was comments around, there's the risk documentation of key risks and mitigations in one register that has everything in one place, all nice and tidy. Another bit is around performance measures, so how we measure our performance and just the metadata. So in terms of how is it measured, who collects the data, all of that information about the methodology is stored in different places, and the recommendation is we move towards a central database of how we progress. So it's all in that improvement space.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. And maybe as a member of the Audit and Risk Committee, I can just mention that the committee, which as you're aware is chaired by Sue Sheldon and has another 2 independent members on, the independent members of that committee spoke very highly about the clarity of the document and the process that had been followed. So I think they'd be happy to put that on record at this meeting. If there's no further questions, I want to thank the finance team, and I'll probably do it again, but to thank all of your team for the extraordinary effort that you've put into this document. I've been really impressed at the professionalism and the quality of the work that's been delivered to us. And I also want to acknowledge Councillor Rossclough as Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee. I think the process has been an extraordinarily good one, and that you can be proud of the work that you've done and you've delivered to us. So thank you very much to including the Chief Executive and the Acting Chief Financial Officer. It's been a very good job, and I think I speak on behalf of all of us to acknowledge the work that you have done. So thank you very much for your attendance, and if I can invite to the table, please, the Deputy Controller and Auditor General, Greg Scollum, and the Audit Director of Audit New Zealand, Joe Smale. Just to repeat, we have delivered. I've had delivered to me the representation letter from the Chief Executive Officer, and I have in turn delivered a letter to the Office of the Auditor General indicating that what we are required to comply with, we have, and that to the best of our knowledge, we in every way comply with the requirements for this long-term plan process. Greg, welcome. Thank you very much for the work that you and your team have done as well, and I invite you to address the governing body on the opinion of the Audit Office.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good morning, councillors. So just quickly to introduce, so Joe Smale on my right is responsible for the day-to-day management of the audit, and Sarah Markley, who's on my far right there, is my chief advisor within the OAG on Auckland matters. So I thought it's appropriate that they're both here with me this morning. Essentially, we've completed our work, which is pretty important given you're about to adopt the long-term plan. Our process started last October, so it's a long audit process, and it effectively is done in 2 phases. So the first phase is so that we can issue an audit report on the consultation document, and my recollection of that was you adopted that in late February. So that was sort of phase 1. You then go out and consult, and then we're during that period working on the audit of the long-term plan, which is now before you. So it's a 2-phased arrangement. I'm in a position today to sign a standard audit report on the long-term plan. So it's what that means is, in our view, the long-term plan is fit for purpose. There are no issues that are of concern to us such that we want to raise those issues in the audit report. We will no doubt issue a management letter to management around the process sort of issues, and we may have some recommendations for fine-tuning that. But in terms of our comfort with the document, with the long-term plan, we believe it's fit for purpose, so there will be a standard audit report signed today and released. I mentioned the 2 phases. So on the consultation document, you may recall that we included a paragraph which drew attention to some uncertainties in the area of transport. We have chosen not to do that in this case because we believe over the months since the CD was adopted, a lot of that uncertainty has been removed. It doesn't mean there's no uncertainty, and every plan in the country has some uncertainty implicit in it. This is planning, this is forward-looking, and it's 10 years. So there's clearly uncertainty. I guess what we're signalling is it's in the normal sort of zone of uncertainty now. So we chose in this long-term plan audit report not to draw attention to those uncertainties. So that's the difference between the Phase 1 audit report and the Phase 2. But yeah, with that, we'd be happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Greg. A standard audit report always seems a bit ordinary, but it's better than the alternative option that you have available to you to issue. Thank you very much to you and your team. Is there anybody else in the team that would like to comment on that, Joe or Sarah? You're fine. So now's the opportunity, councillors, for us to raise any questions that we may have of the Audit Office. Given the nature of the report we've just received, there may not be a lot of questions, but this is an opportunity for you if there's any concern that you have or any issue that you would like to raise. I'll pause just to see if...
No need to pause.
No, I think the indication is, given the nature of your report, Greg, we're very happy with that. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much for the work that you've done. Much appreciated, and we enjoy a very professional relationship with your office, which I think makes it really easy for both sides. Even though we have quite separate roles to play, I think that's done collaboratively and professionally. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you for taking the trouble for being here. Councillors, we now come to any debate on the long-term plan. We've obviously thrashed this issue through over a 7-month period, and I do want to take the opportunity to thank all of the councillors for the input that you've had. The document that we have in front of us is a collective document that starts as my proposal and ends up as our proposal, and that's exactly what it has been. And there has been an enormous amount of work that each of you have put into this, and I think we've come up with a document that is quite transformational as we move into the next decade. But it is now open for any discussion or debate by councillors. I'm happy to accept that we've thrashed that through already and we don't need any further debate, but I need to give you that opportunity. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and just in light of your comments about not relitigating the debate that we had last time, I've just got a few comments to make, and they really have surfaced as a consequence of the month between our last decision, and I think it's important for me anyway to put my views on the record, and they may well reflect other people's views as well. I'm not sure. So I guess the first thing, and I'm going to confine my comments largely to the sort of the flagship, if I could use that term, of the long-term plan, and that's the regional fuel tax, of which there has been a lot of coverage in the intervening month. And I guess I just really want to make it clear, Mr Mayor, that I will be supporting the long-term plan, and I support your attempt to try and really do something meaningful over the next decade to deal with our transport woes, and I think that's certainly been the expectation of our public, and that's why I'm supporting the fuel tax. But I just want to make it clear, Mr Mayor, that it is conditional support, that it's not carte blanche, and I note that the council does have the ability at any time to propose a change to the scheme subject to public consultation. So I think it's important to recognise that, just as much as we're talking about a decade, we do have the ability to make changes either in quantum or in total, and that's certainly the view I'm taking going into this. And I guess the last month has really signalled too issues for me in respect of that, and one is are to do with uncertainties. We don't really know how things are going to pan out in terms of impact on Aucklanders and in delivery of all the projects that have been promised, and which, of course, are largely the driving factor for support. Obviously, if the delivery program is disappointing, both in terms of the number of projects and the timeliness of it, that of course is something that will need to be taken into account. Why else would you support it if we're not getting what we've actually promised our public? So in terms of the impact on the community, and I noticed last time Councillor Collins referred to international studies. We haven't really had any studies. I understand there are some groups that are interested in doing what might have been helpful, and that is looking at how more disadvantaged sections of the community are affected, and no doubt that material will manifest itself over the next couple of years. This is an uncertain environment. It would have been ideal if we went in with a fuel tax at a time when the fuel costs were stable or low. We're going in where they're high and rising. So there is a degree of uncertainty there, and to how that will actually impact not just on the fuel tax itself, but across the wider economy. So that is all information that will become apparent as the years progress. One matter I have brought up, Mr. Mayor, before that doesn't appear to have been picked up yet, but certainly I hope will be, is that given the sacrifice we're really asking in terms of this 11.5 cents, that there has to be some greater degree of oversight of the spend and the delivery of these projects than is normally the case. I don't want to just be a fingers crossed. Let's hope it all turns out okay. I'm expecting that us as the councillors will have far more direct involvement in both the project's costs in terms of budgets and delivery in terms of timeliness. So I just would then, just by way of conclusion, then really restate that for me it's not carte blanche for the next decade. I'm supporting you, Mr. Mayor, because I think it is a bold program that deserves a chance, but we know that there is at the same time the opportunity to revisit that, and if it does not pan out the way in terms of both the impact on our community and the delivery of projects, then there will be very good reason for revisiting that at whatever point that might be appropriate. So willing to support it today with those provisos, which I think would certainly the provisos that our community would set too, that this contribution, such as it is really contingent on delivery and solving Auckland's congestion where it happens right across the region. So I just wanted to make those points clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any further comments around the table? Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Chair. Sorry. I wanted to quote someone. So when I last spoke about the regional fuel tax, I'm not going to relitigate it. I'll be supporting this recommendation this morning. One of the quotes that threw me, because I had begun my little talk that morning by saying I'm the kind of person that goes, picks up a book, reads it, and then goes away and reflects. And Councillor Bartley quoted a quote from Facebook, and it reads, "A society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit." I went away from that meeting, and you got me thinking, Councillor. I must be honest, I certainly went away reflecting on that particular quote. I was encouraged when I had, courtesy of Councillor Filipaina, some people from Auckland Transport come and visit us and talk to us about the social, economic benefit that will come from this for the good folk out south, for young people, the jobs that will be created. So I've had the chance to reflect, and I do welcome that quote. Because I tried to reference everything, I'm pleased to advise you, Councillor Bartley, that it is an old Greek proverb. Just in case you thought, you're on Facebook, you've got a better quote today. So that was really good. So there's been quite a bit of discussion, and I joined a panel on the breakfast show this morning. Didn't realise we'd be talking about excise taxes, but it came up in part of our discussion. over the last few weeks, I've continued to receive both emails and calls that are divided in the community with people saying, look, Efeso will just have to bear the brunt. And I talked about, as already mentioned, about the overwhelming evidence internationally that tells us that this tax is regressive and that it hits the poorest the hardest. And so, in closing, I said that I'll be supporting this, and I wanted to thank you as well, Mr. Mayor, for the opportunity you gave me to have 30 minutes of your time just to kind of talk through the issues and lay everything out on the table. I really welcome the opportunity to come and to speak frankly and honestly with you. But I do want to take this opportunity again to reiterate my discomfort around the regional fuel tax for the poorest ward in the city. And I continue to feel an extreme sense of anxiety as I reflect on the challenges that they will face. There is an article in the Herald today that's talking about how there's a suggestion that actually the wealthier are going to be paying more. And I've looked at those figures very briefly. I'm not an economist, but I would say to you that those figures are probably right. The issue, though, is as a proportion of income, it'll be the poor that are paying the most. Yep. And so in closing, Sue, I want to say thank you to those who've come to talk to me about the jobs that will be created out south as a result of unlocking up to $28 billion of infrastructure funding that's going to benefit, I hope, the young people in particular of South Auckland. The quote was, "A society grows great when old men plant trees whose shade they know they shall never sit." So the area with the least canopy cover in Auckland is Manukau. The wards of Otara, Papatoetoe, Mangere or Tahahu. We have 30% less than some of the wealthier suburbs with their canopy cover. The people of South Auckland continue to pay for trees that will be planted in parts of Auckland their generations after them will never sit under. And it is that challenge that I want to leave this table with. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I should put in an ad that we're doing planting in the Puanui Reserve, I think, in a couple of weeks' time, Councillor, and you and I will both be there. And we'll be planting a lot of trees. And it was a lovely quote from Councillor Josephine. Yeah. Councillor Darby, you got your hand up? No, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you. Sir, it's difficult to balance all the views and needs and desires of 1.6 million people of this region. And we've heard from thousands of them, but many of them are silent. So it's up to us as their representatives to make these decisions on their behalf, hopefully for the better. There's always trade-offs. For example, the petrol tax. We support the new government tax, but we may hurt some of our community who in the last term didn't pay the interim transport levy, particularly people in social housing. But at the same time, we couldn't deliver quickly enough for those same people the public transport we needed that might reduce their reliance on petrol. We've looked at many options to address this, but this lack of funding without government support, there isn't the extra $19 billion over the next 10 years to build what we need. So the trade-off, in spite of its effects, that's the trade-off we've got to deal with here. My disappointment's that this is in the budget for 10 years, and I do hope that we can find the technology or other sources of funding that we can remove this fuel tax in a much shorter time. When I have half of my constituents saying to me, go on, be brave, you've got to get public transport, all my greenies in the hills, absolutely. We've got to be brave. And then I've got the other half of my people, particularly in Henderson Massey ward, and a leafier suburb than Councillor Collins, however, probably the second poorest local board area, second or third, are saying, but that's going to hit me in the pocket. I choose to take my girls up to the kura, there's no bus there, I have to drive them. So for me, in the end, I have to make a judgment call, as we all do. I've heard today, as Councillor Collins said, another take on this, it is a good spin, that it's going to hurt the rich. But, I can afford, I'm not even rich, but I can afford an extra $5 a week. But there are people in my constituency that can't. But I will support this for better or worse, a bit like the relationships a lot of us are in, because I do want to see that public transport, particularly in the West, and I want to see it before 2028, which light rail and our RLTP says it won't be delivered out West for 10 years. You know, that's not good enough. So I will be meeting with Phil Twyford because I want my community to have fast, frequent, reliable public transport. But the only way we're going to get that is by supporting this fuel tax and the LTP. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Yeah, Councillor Darby.
I just want to say something briefly. I'm really excited about this budget. For me, I've been in local government since late '04, and I don't think I've witnessed a budget that was remotely near a budget that we're just about to rubber stamp today, that in my view is going to change the landscape in Auckland, probably in the most dramatic way, probably since the 1950s, post-war. And so we are going to be looking at a very different Auckland 10 years hence, 15 years hence, and 50 years hence out of today. Primarily, I think it's going to be a place where people are housed. It's going to be a place where people are connected, and it's going to be a place where nature is protected out of our decisions today. It's been referred to it as a build-it budget, and it is. I sort of term it in my own way as a shape-shifting budget for Auckland. But I'm just going to fire a little warning to us all here. We're confirming a budget that is quite significant, that enables that build-it, subject to. And the subject to is we are going to have to change the culture of our organisation politically and management, our CCOs, so too government, if it is going to realise what's promised in this budget. We've not faced that before. We've not faced a situation where we've voted budget of such significance with such great expectation. And that expectation is only going to be delivered upon if we reshape how we make our subsequent decisions. And that will require us politically, in some cases management, getting out of the way, doing business very, very differently in the future. We can't, members, in my view, be getting embroiled in a lot of minutiae. We can't we just cannot, because this budget will not be delivered upon. So there's going to be some testing there for us as politicians, councillors, local board members, and also, government MPs, ministers, to ensure that we deliver on the promise in a timely way. Because if we don't, this will just be budget lines. Now, I stress that because there really is a need to change our organisation now. And I invite the Chief Executive and the Mayor to start to have that discussion with us now as to how we need to get out of the way to allow our consultants, the construction sector, and our staff at council and all the various agencies to get on and take those budgets and transform those budget lines into real projects for our people.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Deputy Mayor Cashmore.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. A little bit in the same lines as Councillor Darby, really, and Councillor Watson. This particular budget delivers us $4.2 billion in extra capital expenditure in transport alone. 1.385 of that comes from the fuel tax. The $28 billion ATAP budget over the 10 years not only delivers an enhanced transport program, but also additionally 3,000 jobs. And to Councillor Darby's point, none of that can happen unless we have significant change of mindset and delivery from government, but also from the industry. We need to lift the capacity substantially to deliver on these programs. And we need to work collaboratively with the Crown and also the industry to do that. Transportation is Aucklanders' number one issue, closely followed by housing. The two are all very strongly interlinked through the infrastructure provision, whether it's pipes or roads or PT. All are equally essential to have a growing, improving lifestyle for all Aucklanders. And as we are a big chunk, over a third of this country's GDP, and growing fast, the Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga triangle is probably attracting more than 50% of the country's population growth and is probably creating around 80% of additional jobs. To meet that challenge, we have to be looking at the horizon. We have to be planning ahead. But by gosh, we've got to be looking right beside us at what is being put down on the ground, in the ground, and being built on top of it. Because if we don't, we will continue to fall behind. So the challenge is new technology, new methods of delivery, but also certainty. Business cannot survive without certainty, and a 10-year, $28 billion budget does create that certainty because it's fully funded. So I commend the work that's gone into the creation of this. And I commend my fellow councillors' bravery, aspirations and vision, because this is something that we simply must do.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I speak in support of the long-term plan. There are parts of it that I don't support, and you know that, and they are noted. I speak in support of the local boards who've all put their input into their part of what makes up our long-term plan. To be honest, I didn't think if you'd asked me a year ago whether I would be supporting an extra rate, targeted rate based on the capital value of your home for anything. If you'd asked me I would support that, I would have said probably no. But the point I want to make is that in my vote around those kind of issues are based on the feedback from people. I firmly believe, people in my ward, I firmly believe if we take the time and effort to go out and ask Aucklanders what they think, that it is certainly my duty to respond accordingly. And the message I want to give to Aucklanders, if there are things in this long-term plan that you don't like, did you feedback? Because I want Aucklanders to be very clear, from my perspective, that actually Council does listen. We are giving you the opportunity, and I think we need to do more in that space to make sure we get more people feeding back. So my vote, as I said, is in support of the majority of it, with points that I have noted from the May meeting still rolling through for today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've lived in Mangere. We moved in 1960 into Mangere and still live there. Also worked in the police for 38.5 years in the county's Manukau district, so I know the ward quite well. And it's interesting, I'm only going to make one point, Your Worship, because I'm not going to cover off on what people have already contributed. But I've noticed one thing since the original vote that we had at the governing body around the regional fuel tax, is that I have had meetings with the community since then, because I obviously voted for the regional fuel tax. And what was interesting, Your Worship, is that not too many people know that the interim transport levy is gone.
Mm. Yeah.
And I was actually quite surprised with that, because I said to them, it's in the consultative document. I also mentioned to them and said, look, did you know, I don't know whether you've got a vehicle, but did you know that if you haven't got a vehicle, that you won't be paying $114 for those that own the house? And they says, no, we didn't. So that's really the only point I want to make here publicly, is that the interim transport levy has gone. For those that are using public transport, that you are not paying the 114. Yes, I know the argument. There are a lot of our homes in the area that Councillor Collins has spoken about with our ward. I mean, I know that there's a lot of renting, Housing New Zealand, so they don't own the home. But for those that do, that's really the point I want to make. And it was surprising that 99% of the people that I've met, that I've spoken to with groups, didn't know that. So I obviously will be supporting the long-term plan. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank Thank you, Councillor, and thank you for reminding us that a removal of the rate somehow doesn't get the same publicity that the imposition of a new one does. Right, we've got Councillor Fletcher.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. Some of you know that the last year or so for me has been a bit tricky with a very close family member who is struggling with dementia. And I'm having to spend quite a bit of my time out south, where, you know, my home is in Mount Eden and I've been there for 42 years, but I've been basing myself in order that I can share in the nursing and the care for this family member. And I guess I just reflected as I was thinking and listening to the news first thing this morning, because I leave at 5:45 a.m, as I don't need to remind you or Councillor Cashmore, I leave very early in the morning so that I can be here to participate in the debates. And I was listening to whether the weighting was going to be on hitting the poorest or hitting the richest or quite whom, and I reflected on all of that. But I guess where I'm coming from is that I've watched Auckland plan itself to death over the last 25 years. We've had plan after plan from legacy councils, we've had regional council plans, we've had mayoral forum plans, we've had, you name it, we have planned, but we have never been able to implement. You know, it's not been a shortage of good ideas, it's just been the inability to deliver. And I think today I'm happy to support most of this budget, because for me it is about seeing those faces, because I can't get public transport for where I'm based out south at the moment, so I have to bring the car whether I want to or not. And that sense of aggression, competition for lanes, these days you can't get from Linwood Road. It takes me an hour virtually from Linwood Road before I can actually get on the motorway at Papakura. And then we all know what happens between Drury and Papakura and Takanini. It's the look of desperation in people's faces, the look on those people's faces at the loss that they are not spending time with their children, that they are not able to see them off to school, that they are not able to do those things that actually really brings the quality of life for all of us, irrespective of where we're living across Auckland. There is a sense of desperation by people who are, for whatever reason, having to take part in that daily commute. So for me, I'm going to put up my hand, and I know there will be a lot of people who will object to me doing so, but the fuel tax has been around as a possibility for a long, long time. This is not new. Many of us have tried to advocate for this in the past. So today will be about the ability for Aucklanders to implement the many, many, many plans we've had. So I'm supporting that today. But I'm mindful of our communities and the things that they want and the quality of life issues for them. So I want to touch on something that Councillor Holst was speaking of before, and that is, as part of this budget, there is quite an important component on the parks, the recreational side. And I've been pleased to be working with Matthew and his team. I've tried to understand the parameters as we look at the delivery of a lot of these projects, what the policy parameters are going to underpin them, how we're going to make sure that we can say with certainty to the public that the business case that we will put over whatever is being proposed will actually be done with integrity, that it will be done with rigour, that we will absolutely ensure that every single dollar that is being spent is going into those services that Aucklanders will treasure. I think there is a lack of confidence out in the public that we actually don't have as great a handle on those funds as we might. Now, whether that's, that's not for today, but I think it's a real challenge for the CEO, and I congratulate him on his reappointment. But I do want to make sure that we don't get the cart before the horse. We've only got a 3-year electoral cycle. It's really hard to put in place big projects in such a short period of time. And I want to particularly speak of parks, sports and recreation, and I know that Councillor Hulse is doing a really good, she's leading work that was commenced in the last term, which started off with the sustainability of sports, but I don't know that we've actually landed in a place yet, and I know that it will perhaps test the relationship we have with local boards, but I don't think we have heard sufficiently well from Aucklanders yet as to what it is that they're going to require and the policy parameters that we're going to put in place to make sure that people can have access to those things that really give them meaning in their lives. So I want the confidence in knowing, and under the acting Chief Financial Officer, I know that he is committed to it, and I want to thank him for the work, but I really do believe that we need to do a better job in taking the public with us, on demonstrating that we've got the policy. There was an issue just last week where the 17A review might have jumped ahead of the public policy development of the parks, and it's not the time to go into that now, but the public need to have confidence on that. Speaking to Councillor Simpson's feedback, I actually think Aucklanders have got consultation fatigue. I think they know we've got the plans, they just want us to get on with it, and that's what the budget is about today, because the lion's share of it, of course, is related to transport. So I don't want to see us fritter the goodwill that we have in the public with other things, which is probably why I'm still aggrieved about not getting on top of issues like the targeted accommodation rate in a satisfactory way. But the broad thrust of the budget is very good. It's been a budget that I think everyone has come together on, and again I want to commend the staff because they've made it possible for me to be able to support it today, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this is a transformational budget, and it's a budget that looks forward. I mean, every question we get from the public is, why haven't you done that? This week with the news of the Safe Swim results and the issues on Takapuna Beach, people say, well, why haven't you done that? People ask why we're stuck in traffic. The Cody dieback issue. Everyone says, well, why is it like it now? Well, we're actually doing the job now, and looking forward, we're addressing those issues. We can look back and keep getting angry, but we actually need to look forward. The Cody dieback issue, yes, there may have been things we should have done in the past, but now we've increased the budget from 5 million to 100 million over 10 years, and we're acting on it. With the water, we've increased the water infrastructure budgets by 50% in one long-term plan. 50% is huge, a huge increase on infrastructure, and that won't fix everything right away, but it's actually speeding up what previous council should have been doing, and maybe we should have been doing, but we're doing it, which is the important thing. We've got the sports partnership funding, 120 million that will go into dealing with the big issues in our communities around sports that they're all asking us, why are we lagging behind? We're doing that. There's huge budgets for renewals and things to address playgrounds and money going into our libraries and keeping up those services. That's all in there. When we're dealing with the big issues around water and environment and transport, we're still making sure we're funding our Auckland Art Gallery, which we heard loud and clear that we needed to support. We're increasing the regional arts grants, thanks to Councillor Casey and others, that will help give us great events and good programs for young people and other people around our communities. That's in there. We've got huge feedback from right across our communities on many, many things. There's thousands of things in this budget that we'll never be able to talk about because there's just not enough time. But we're able to do all those things with the best of our ability. It's not going to be perfect, but I think, we're doing some huge, huge stuff here. On the transport space, I mean, we are already doing a lot. If we expected in 4 years to have 300,000 or 400,000 hop cards. We hit the 1 million mark over a year ago by this time, so doing amazing work there. We're hitting 92 million trips a year on the Auckland Transport already, and that's because we've invested. This is going to ramp up that investment. That's going to ramp up the issues. But we've got to remember, we're only about 10 years in to a rapid transport system. London's 150 years in. People talk about London. They've been building for 150 years. Hong Kong, 50 years. You know, someone said to me the other day, oh, why don't you just build a rapid transport link like they have in Hong Kong? Well, that one project cost $35 billion. So our total budget for 10 years is $28 billion. So we can't be like other cities because we don't have the populations. But this budget shows what we can do, and it's standing up. You know, we're seeing the horror on our roads of deaths and serious injuries, pedestrians, cyclists, everyone. We have to use this budget and explain to people why this is important for our communities, how we can get young people on public transport, walking and cycling to school safely, and parents can go off to work and know that their kids are going to be safe when they get through the doors. I met a grandmother on the bus the other day, and she told me that, and I couldn't understand because I'd seen her before, where she was going, where she was coming from. She gets up in the morning, takes the grandkids on the bus to school in the opposite direction of the house, then gets off, gets the hops back on the bus, gets back to the same place again, hops up on another bus and gets to work. She said she does that all in 40 minutes, 3 different buses, and it cost her $1.90. You know, she said before it was almost pointless because we had to pay for transfers, you had to pay for extra buses, it didn't work. She said the system's so easy now, she barely ever needs to take the car, and the kids love it. So we're getting there in some areas, but we need to ramp it up. You know, talking about people wasting time in traffic, my dad is floor sander my whole life. He's 61, 62 now, and he still works basically 6 or 7 6 days a week. When we were kids, Mum was really sick, was paralysed and in a wheelchair for some time when we were kids, and then was never able to work again. So Dad basically worked 6 or 7 days a week. He would go off before we woke up, and he'd get back at 6 or 7 at night. And most of his day was stuck in traffic back, you know, when I was a kid, and it's still now. He spends most of his time in traffic, but he has seen huge changes. He says the Harbour Bridge, because of the busway, he said you're never stuck there anymore. He said it has cut off half an hour off his day both ways because of the busway, because other people are using buses, so he and his workers can drive around. So I know what it's like to spend not a lot of time with Dad because of transport and traffic. We're not going to fix it overnight, but I think that this budget will change the way we live and change our city so we can actually spend more time with family doing the fun things that the other parts of this budget cover. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Supporting the long-term plan, but because we're talking about the fuel tax, I'm going to talk about that. And no, Councillor Collins, I don't have a Facebook quote, but if I see something good, I'll tag you in it. I got my first real job. So my first job was cleaning the convent after school at Macaulay High School. And that was cool because it was after school. I didn't have to travel anywhere. You know, I just go there after my classes finished. But my actual first real part-time job was at the airport. Like most kids that grow up in Mangere, you kind of work near where you live. And my family, my dad's weekly income was $328, and he raised 3 of us on that income. What would have helped us when we were growing up would have been public transport to help me get to my part-time job. And I have no doubt that would have helped other families in the similar situation as ours, for, you know, kids that are working, people that are working where they were working in places where there was no public transport to get to. So my dad would drop me off to my part-time job. So that vote on the fuel tax, although it was difficult, I did it for the next generators. To make to give them options to make their lives better in the future. But what we talk about here, we need it backed up by Auckland Transport, and we need it backed up by the organisation. Because that very day we did that vote, I had people in my community commenting that public buses were going to be more expensive. So we really do need to ensure that, yeah, we talk about public transport, but it needs to be affordable, it needs to be easier, and it needs to be accessible.
Hear, hear.
And at the moment, my email is blowing up because of the bus network changes that are happening, where people are going to end up going, you know, having 2 stops instead of 1 stop to get to where they need to get to. So I really do emphasise that we need public transport to work, and we need it to stay affordable and accessible and easier to use. I look at the city centre. I haven't been on council long enough to know what's going on with the plans there, but there's no bus station. So if we can accommodate America's Cup, we can accommodate boats, we should be able to accommodate a good bus station for people to be able to catch their buses into the city. So that's all I have to say. Nothing else about Facebook quotes. Thank you.
It's too late. You've been immortalised, Councillor, by that quote. Thank you very much. Councillor Stewart.
Yeah. Well, as of the 1st of July, I think that's going to be the real test, and I think all of us around the table and all Aucklanders are going to really be tested by the day that they go to the pump and they have to pay for that extra fuel. Yes, the transport levy, that's been removed, but it has been, that tax or that levy has actually been replaced by some other targeted rates. So there really isn't any real change there. So those people that are renting, they're going to find that, you know, the fuel's going to go up, everything, there's going to be a flow-on effect, and the food, clothing, everything's just going to get so much more expensive, even those that are renting. So I'm just going to stand by what I've said all along. I'm not supporting the fuel tax, and so today I'm not actually going to be able to even support this if the fuel tax, because I support this, means that the fuel tax as of the 1st of July, people in Auckland are going to be really hit in the pocket. And I was just listening to what Councillor Richard Hills was saying about, you know, people being able to get out there to do fun things. Well, I tell you what, people are going to be really, really struggling, and it's not just, it's people in all of our communities, in the middle class, everybody's going to be struggling, because every day's a struggle. People trying to pay their mortgage, their rents, their everything. So as of the 1st of July, I think that's going to be the real test. So I won't be able to support this today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I mean, ultimately, this item is about voting to provide supply, and I'm not going to vote to oppose the provision of supply. So I'll be voting for the item, although whilst I don't want to relitigate every matter, of course there are some issues where I have disagreed with the budget, and my vote reflects that, particularly with respect to the regional fuel tax. Your Worship, I do think that a number of the comments that have been expressed around the table today are very salient. I agree with the sentiment. I think it was Councillor Watson who really reflected the essence of this, that there is a limit to the community's tolerance around certain things. There is a limit to the community's tolerance for the sale of local infrastructure that the community has paid for over many, many years and considers intrinsic to that community's well-being. I think that there is a limit to our ability to sustain new target rates. I accept what Councillor Filipaina said in relation to the removal of the interim transport levy, but Councillor Stewart is right. Of course people aren't going to feel the removal of that, because it's been replaced by 2 new target rates, water quality and the environment target rate. And yeah, look, Councillor Hills, I agree with you in relation to Safe Swim. Yes, we are actually doing something, but we are actually doing something in certain locations. We're not doing it in every location. There are still lots and lots of beaches on the Manukau Harbour that you can't swim in. And you're not going to be able to swim in it even after we've spent all the revenue that's going to be levied and raised to fund the work program in relation to water quality, because it's not in every location. So, yeah, there are some parts of Auckland that are going to feel that they're well represented in the 10-year plan. They're well represented when it comes to who pays, but when it comes to, well, what is the benefit for those communities, some people are concerned that there isn't an equitable allocation of benefit. You know, I think that with respect to what the community wants, Councillor Simpson, what the community wants, I think is best encapsulated by what the local boards requested through their One Local initiative. And the reality is that when you look at the One Local initiative, I think that a lot of those One Local initiatives have been redefined to include business as usual. And so some of those local boards and the communities that they represent will say, oh, well, actually, we felt a bit shortchanged by that. Now, that's not necessarily the fault of the process. The reality is that we've got to live within our means, but it certainly doesn't aid the desire, the need for a consensus around what we can do. You know, I think that with respect to the haves and the have-nots, I'd say this: there is a drudgery to poverty, and that does not really afford for some people to get into the business, the pleasure of vision exercises around what the next 10 years, the next 20 years, the next generation will be, and where their part will be in that scheme, in that visioning exercise. For those people, the vision is how to make next week's rent, to get to work, to start the shift today, to earn the salary, to earn the wage, to make next week's rent. And I have to say to Councillor Cashmore that for me, those people are the brave people. Those people are the people who are particularly brave because they have no choice but to go to that blue-collar job, to drive to that job because there actually isn't the public transport available to them, but they do it because they have to do it for their family. But, Your Worship, I just want to conclude by paying tribute to you, because this is not an easy process, and you have a long history of advocacy for those in our community who have the least. You have, throughout your entire political life, been an advocate for those people, and for that I have a strong residual affection for you because of that. And so I believe that the intent of this proposal that you have brought forward is to try and make Auckland a better place for as many people as possible. And to that extent, I think that there are some really good aspects to this budget, and I want to acknowledge that, notwithstanding the challenges of debates and discussions that are had from time to time, you are to be commended for the work that you lead as the elected Mayor of Auckland, and for the work that you have put into this proposal. Yes, there are things where we disagree, but I would like to think that those things that we don't agree on can be overcome by all the things that we do agree on, and there are many of those too. So I want to thank you, Your Worship. Notwithstanding my opposition to aspects of this budget, I'm happy to vote for it.
Thank you very much, Councillor, and for your generous words. Councillor Sayers. And then finally, I think Councillor Clow too.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to thank you and the councillors for their input around the debating chamber today. It's been very, very interesting to listen to. And I want to back the comments from Councillor Newman and Councillor Fletcher around the broad thrust of this LTP. Is very positive for Auckland, and it is about providing that certainty of supply that you mentioned, Councillor Newman. So just picking up the points, just listening to the other councillors there, Mr Mayor, particularly perhaps Councillor Stewart, and I noticed Councillor Newman just referring to some concerns that they might have around endorsing the LTP and therefore being seen to endorse the regional fuel tax. So that if there might be a way of being able to vote today where we can just register that perhaps opposition to the fuel tax. And you know, I've been opposed to the fuel tax, as you know. I felt that that could have been, the projects could be funded from finding internal savings, efficiency savings of between 140 and 150 million a year. So my stance is still the same, Your Worship, but rather than perhaps having to vote against this recommendation that we have in front of us, is there a way that we could vote in support of the broad thrust of this LTP, but still being able to register that non-support for the regional fuel tax, and part of that would be that it wouldn't be carried unanimously in that situation, but is there a way of recording that?
I've done that.
Thank you, Councillor. I think you've made the point about your opposition to parts of it, and I think Councillor Newman made the point before. It is about supply, and I think there are a lot of people that like a whole lot of the budget. They won't necessarily like every aspect of it. That's the nature of politics and how we do things. But people have had the chance, and in this discussion, to register that there are things that they are less happy with, but generally they think that it's moving in the right direction.
I was just trying to find a compromise there, Your Worship. So,
no, it's, I think you found it.
No, well,
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you if you're
no,
still partway through your speech.
Worship. It's just I guess supplementary on that. Just wonder if we could perhaps get some advice on how we could actually do that through you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
Could we get some advice how we could actually register that? Because I'm hearing a number of other councillors nodding that they might be in some situation.
Yeah, if I can just answer that, it's a little unusual in the debate to have question and answer, but to say, I think councillors who didn't support the regional fuel tax have already registered that on the 31st of May by voting against it. So you're already on record in terms of the vote on that specific issue. Yep. This is a vote on the overall long-term plan. Okay, I'm going to ask, before I conclude, Councillor Clow, as the Chair of the Finance and Performance Committee, to contribute to the debate.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I just want to thank staff. Thank you to Matthew and the team, with the finance team, but also the team from Community Facilities and also local board services for the work that they did in many aspects, especially on the One Local Board initiatives. And also thank you to the councillors for their contribution in the debate when we did discuss the mayoral proposal twice, because there have been two proposals, and I think we've had an effect on that. And particularly want to thank the Mayor and his advisors on floor 27 for flexibility, listening and incorporating some important changes. Needless to say, I had to fight a little bit for the Panuku work program along with a few others, but that's in there, and I think it's a very important program to have in the light of the government coming up with an urban development agency. It's good that we do have our own equivalent agency to be contributing and hopefully equally contributing, and if not, having the say in the important areas where we've determined what's transform and what's unlock. Targeted rates, I've heard some councillors effectively say one is we've just merely put in some new targeted rates. I mean, the important thing is the feedback that we've had with targeted rates is we seem to have hit on a good idea with targeted rates. We're getting good feedback from residents that that's the way to go. They like us identifying what we're going to spend the money on and where it's going to be held, and it cannot be going into the consolidated pot. There seems to be no question that that's the way to go. And I also want to comment that I do, and again I thank the mayoral proposal, that we did make it a much more equitable way of raising those two targeted rates we've incorporated as compared to the previous targeted, or I should say the composition of the interim transport levy, which was obviously was not equitable and did favour business. So I just want it known that the fact that we've moved to capital value and the fact that business is paying as per the long-term differential target of 25.8, that means business overall is paying more and it paying actually what is equitable. So I think we've made a great stride with the targeted rates, and I think that's something that we will be looking at going forward. The regional fuel tax, I mean, I've actually got a very poor ward to it. I don't know where we rank or the FO ranks, but we're not exactly a flash ward. But do I oppose the regional fuel tax? It would be terribly hypocritical of me to do that, given the amazing amount of investment that has gone into New Lynn over many years, about 450 million. And when I look at what's been delivered transport-wise, there's not much for my ward, but I'm totally aware that the CRL, which is not part of it, is happening now. And when that opens in 3 or 4 years' time, it's going to make a fantastic difference to Avondale, New Lynn, etc., especially the west, because we're going to be able to halve the time to get in from New Lynn or Henderson to Britomart, or New Lynn to Britomart. It's just going to be halved, and that's going to make a tremendous difference for public transport use, where people are going to say, hey, that's a much more viable thing for us to do. It's more reliable, I can get there faster, etc. Important thing to note, and I want to be watching over the next year or two, that I'm hoping Auckland Transport do not come back to us with a proposal to increase fares. We have some of the highest public transport fares in the world. There's many reasons for that. We're a very spread out city, and we're a long way away from fuel supplies. But the bottom line is, I think it would be a terrible mistake if we end up ratcheting up public transport fares in the light of the regional fuel tax. Surely we can try and keep them where they are, or improve the structural composition again in order to attract more people. And I think it would be self-defeating if we end up contemplating increasing fares. I think this is a budget for all of Auckland. I've said it before. I think that's a big difference. It might have, at the start, people might have thought, hey, it's so much a CBD based, America's Cup, etc., the wharves. But what we've done through the transport program, it's pretty. The benefits are spread fairly wide across the city, and I take my hat off to the Deputy Mayor for having an influence there, but I think we've achieved a lot through those programs. And clearly the Panuka Work Program and the One Local Board initiatives are giving pretty well everyone something, and it's just now the issue is the timing and sequencing and when we actually get to do things. So, and the last thing I just really want to confirm, in case there's any mischief anywhere, the rate rise is 2.5. That is what the rate rise is. If you live in an area where the valuation of your house has gone up by more than 43%, you'll be paying more than 2.5. But if you, overall, it is 2.5. And I know in my ward, where the valuations are generally about 40% up, people are going to be paying 2.3, 2.4. So, but let's be quite clear. Overall, there's the 2.5, and yes, there is the regional fuel tax on top of that, but that is a tax, and it's by and large is a separate item. So I just want to say congratulations to all. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Clough, and thank you very much to all of the councillors who have contributed to this debate. Can I just begin by reflecting on the fact that I thought that the comments from everyone were thoughtful and considered. This is only my second council budget, but I have sat through 32 parliamentary ones, and I can't remember a parliamentary debate that was quite so calm, thoughtful and considered as the one that we've just had around this table. And I think it is a case of people talking to each other, not past each other, people saying what was on their mind, what their values were, what their desires and vision for the city is, rather than simply the exchange of political slogans. So can I acknowledge that and say that I think that this has been all the way through an incredibly constructive and positive process. Can I say this as well, that I think that the passing of this 10-year budget is the beginning of a decade of transformation for our city. And that transformation will be obvious in the fact that for the first time we will have the ability to make real inroads into the massive problem of transport congestion and the failure to have alternative options for people than the use of private cars. It's not the first thing we've done, but it's the first time that we have put a level of investment into our city that can make a real difference. $28 billion going into our transport system in the next decade. There has never been a time in the history of our city when we have made that commitment. But of course, to have that money to invest, you've got to have the revenue source for it. And I want to thank councillors for having the courage to take the decisions to raise the money so that we can invest it. I pick up Councillor Fletcher's point. We've never been short of plans. We have often been short of courage to actually take the hard decisions so that we can make a difference for our city. And I don't think there's anyone sitting around this table that believes that we actually had the option of doing nothing while our gridlock and our congestion got worse. To pick up Councillor Watson's point, will it be a smooth path? Not in my experience. There'll be huge challenges all along the way. Getting the skilled people to do the construction work, getting the companies able to do that, making sure that when we're making this huge investment that we can actually go out and deliver in the face of construction costs that have been rising by 7 or 8% a year. But I do know this, that if you don't start with the investment capital to enable you to do it, then you'll make no progress. We have got the capital, we have raised it. Auckland has contributed its fair share, because while I welcome the fact we've got some billions extra out of central government, and rightly so, because we do pay 38% of the taxes around this country, we had to have our skin in the game. We couldn't sit there as the most wealthy and the biggest city in our country and say, please, somebody else come and give us a handout. We think that you and the provincial areas of New Zealand should be paying to meet our costs. So I think, without exaggerating that this is a silver bullet, it isn't. We can say that we have taken the first step towards a transformational change where people will have decent public transport systems, where we can do some real stuff on the heavy rail, the third, the fourth main trunk lines, the electrification to Pukekohe, the new electric trains. We can make a big difference there. We can make a big difference on our busways that are planned. We can make a big difference on the development of the ferry services. We can do more for walking and cycling. You know, Back to the Future, where people actually used to do more of both of those things before we became the third most obese population in the Western world. We can make a difference, and we will, on transport. On water quality, it was really good this week, like Councillor Collins. I did some breakfast television. When people say, my God, is it good enough that 22% of the time our beaches weren't safe to swim in around Auckland? What are you doing about it? And we are doing something about it. Yes, and Aucklanders have agreed to it. I've got no apologies for a targeted rate on water quality. 2 to 1, Aucklanders said to us, get on and do it. Get on and do it. Don't wait. Don't find excuses for not doing it. Do it and we'll contribute. They had the chance to make submissions and to express their opinion, and they did so through Colmar Brunton and the submission process to say, we want you, the council, to show leadership. Clean up our beaches. Make it better for our kids and our grandkids, and we will. And in 10 years' time, every one of us sitting around this table will be proud to say we were part of that process of transformation. I want to acknowledge Councillor Hulse for being an incredible crusader for this. We will make a difference. It will be obvious. We will make this a world-class city. And we won't suffer the shame of saying for 90 years we've been putting our stormwater in with our wastewater and tipping it into the harbour whenever it rained. That is something worthwhile that we will have achieved. And likewise on the environmental front. You know, when our iconic trees, when our native forests, when our native bird life are under threat, do we have to do something special? Yes, and Auckland has told us again, get on and do it. I'm not going to go through the list. I thought Councillor Hills did a pretty good job on saying a whole lot of things where we're making a difference. I do want to mention Sport and Rec and that fund of $120 million, because that is important to the life of our city and making it a good place to live. Reversing the cuts to the art gallery, I think all of us are really happy around that. Councillor Simpson, Councillor Fletcher and others, Councillor Clow really worked hard with me on that to get that change. I think there's so much in this budget that is really good. But will everybody agree with everything? No. I'm happy to have a situation where councillors can register their opposition to aspects. I think there's provision within our standing orders to be able to do that, to say I'm voting for this because I want supply, I want this long-term plan, I want a better future for our city, but I just do want to register. I'm not in favour of the regional fuel tax, or I'm not in favour of the extension to Airbnb. I think we can do that. I'm happy for you to have your voice heard within the context of supporting the overall thrust of this budget. So a big thank you once again to all of you around this table who have contributed, who have knocked on my door, come in, talk to me, can we do this? You know, this is really important in our area. Is it possible to accommodate it? And I think we have. And again, Councillor Clough, thank you for the work on the local initiatives, and you put an enormous effort into that. But I want to finish again where I started earlier on, thanking our professional staff for the work that they put in, and Stephen and Matthew, if you can pass on to our officers. They come into a lot of flack. We all come into a lot of flack in local government, but they have worked hard, they've worked conscientiously, they've worked effectively, they are competent and they are capable people, and we're really proud to have them work as part of our staff.
Yeah.
So I think at this stage that's the conclusion of the debate. Don't think I've got anything other than to put the motion for the vote, but I am at the conclusion of that happy for people to register that there is an aspect, if there is an aspect of the budget that they don't support. So the resolution is in front of you to adopt the long-term plan with the minor editorial changes. I'm putting that motion. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye. Aye.
To the contrary, no.
No.
Sorry, no, and who would like that? Anybody like that registered?
Thank you.
Councillor Sayers?
I will as well. Yeah.
And that's the long-term plan as a whole. Councillor Sayers, Councillor Stewart, register a vote against. And those that wish to have a particular aspect of their opposition recorded.
I've done that already.
Yeah.
I'll
Councillor Simpson.
I'll email Sandra.
I think that if you indicate that to Sandra, we can get an accurate reflection. Thank you very much, councillors, for that vote of support. That is fantastic. Right, we come. I think we'll just move on to the next one, shall we? People ready to do that? You do? Yep.
Next budget.
Right.
Annual plan.